I'll go ahead and reintroduce myself, and maybe Christy and Darius, if I could have you all come off of not sharing your video and say hi to everybody. Yeah, it'd be great to have your faces. Hello, there you are. I have your here, so I'll be up there. Looking at you both a lot. So again, we're here today to talk about how to support students navigating the path to getting into and really thriving in a successful tech career. I'm really excited to be part of the conversation with y'all. And I'll say before we get on to introductions and everything else like that, really encourage folks to be throwing comments and questions into the chat as part of an introduction of myself, and then I'll kick it over to Christy and Darius. I'll say that my first job out of college was a high school math teacher, and I know that a quiet classroom is a terrifying one. I always want students and listeners to be active and participating, so please feel free to throw all of your questions our way. So again, my name is Michael Harbaugh. I work now as the Director of Education Partnerships at CodePath. Previously, I was at Handshake for 7 years, so maybe some of you in the career services world have seen my name before. Apologies for all the emails my team used to send you. I'm responsible for helping CodePath scale our organization more in partnership with higher education rather than going direct to student like we have in the past. Just super passionate about this work and about all things social justice education. That's me. And I'll pass it. I'll go to Christy. Christy, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Christy Brescia. I'm an academic and a career manager at the College of Staten Island, the City University of New York. I've been at CSI for over 30 years. I've worked in a variety of roles, all in student services. 5 years ago, I was lucky enough to be part of a program called CUNY 2X, where we looked at academic and career advising simultaneously. And the results in our department have been amazing, and a lot of that is with our partnership with CodePath. So my goal is to have every student graduate, but graduate with a really quality job upon graduation. And I'm very happy to be part of this webinar.
Awesome. Day one, Darius, take it away.
Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Darius Robinson, Day One Darius on all social media platforms. I'm a lead technical recruiting strategist for Amazon Web Services. I've worked in this space at a main company for almost 6 years now. But a little more about my background. I actually have a master's degree in higher education. My initial goal was to actually work through the rankings and become a VP of student success. I was the vice president of student government when I was in college. So I really have a passion for student development and career development at the early stage. I also came across CodePath as I primarily recruit software engineers about 3 years ago, and the amount of success that I've seen students that go through this program and the passion that this company has, it's really made me more of an advocate and an ambassador to get more students involved. So I'm happy to be here and speak on behalf of other large tech companies and see what problems we can solve together.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. Appreciate it. Looking forward to the conversation. So where I'll start us today is with a quick introduction of CodePath and really what the conversation we're having is all about, why we're here, what are the challenges, and maybe some of the ways we can face them. And then we'll just dig into an open-ended conversation with these two lovely professionals. And would also love to make sure we get your questions from the community that's listening today. So again, please feel free to throw those comments and questions into the chat. I'll start briefly with an overview of just what CodePath is. So we're a nonprofit organization dedicated to creating the most diverse generation of tech leaders. We actually started our story as a for-profit company running internal upskilling and tech training for companies like Airbnb, Meta, and Uber. And in 2017, we decided that helping students was probably way more fun than helping senior tech professionals become VPs of engineering. So we took the curriculum and expertise we developed and decided to apply it to helping students break into the tech industry. Our method has been to go directly to students and offer free courses to tens of thousands of motivated young people in CS programs. Demand for these courses has risen about 30% year over year. So we're trying to scale up to meet that demand, currently with 100,000 students a year in mind as where we want to get to. And we're also now building partnerships with colleges and universities to help meet that scale goal, figuring out how can we help more students get access to our courses directly And how can we share outcomes data back with the higher education community? So that's just a little bit about us, but really what I want to do is sort of frame the conversation on why we're here. We're discussing the challenges that students in technical degree programs face in breaking into the tech world and what employers and folks from higher education can do about it. I majored in history. I'll freely admit that my knee-jerk reaction when I first spoke to CodePath was something to the effect of, is this really a problem that needs solving? Do we need to help the computer engineers? I took some convincing, but I have come to see that this is a major challenge that we're facing. I think from my own experience that this picture you see in front of you here, this is really what a lot of out here. I got one history major in the chat. I'll take it. This paints a picture of what many outsiders who are not in this early talent recruiting space think of as the pathway that a CS student can follow to get a great start in the tech world. It's linear, it's simple, and it ends with a six-figure offer. The reality today, though, is very, very different. Rising higher education costs continue to drive up the number of students starting their career at two-year institutions. And when they transfer, the course load catch-up in a CS program can be crushing. When it comes to finding internships, we hear story after story of students sending out hundreds of applications, not hearing anything back. I'll also add here, as I said, my background is working at Handshake. I still believe in the impact and value of platforms like those, but it's true that making it incredibly fast and easy for millions of students to apply to roles has created challenges for recruiting teams like the one Darius is leading, who need to find signal through all of that noise. And when students do hear back, they're often asked to take part in leak code style online assessments. And Christy will be the first to tell you that sometimes students aren't prepared for those. Some have independently prepared, but many, it's a trial by fire. They have to make preparing for the technical interview process an out-of-class hobby just so they can catch up. And if all of that seems a little bit daunting, the broader job market trends are exacerbating these challenges in a lot of ways. We saw a huge surge of post-COVID hiring, with numbers of postings on Indeed doubling the pre-COVID levels by early 2022. But now hiring is slow. The tech job market has even contracted compared to where we were before the pandemic. And as we can see on this bottom graph, there's a trend of diminishing layoffs over the last 2 years. So fortunately, that's moving in the right direction. But we're seeing a number of other factors combine to make the job market for early tech talent more competitive than ever. A reticence to hire as companies learn to adapt and take advantage of AI innovation, that's by far the flashiest factor that we all hear about. Everyone is thinking about AI all the time. But employers are also continuing to offshore CS roles. If anything, COVID has underlined how effective remote work can be for some roles. To give two examples, my last employer, Handshake, has a sizable European engineering team. At CodePath, we're a fully remote team. We have tech talent working in Europe, a large team in Southeast Asia. I'm speaking to you today from my home in London, so I'm a pretty good poster child for this myself. And lastly, the number of CS students graduating in the US has never been higher. In 2023, there were 600,000 students in the United States majoring in computer science programs and information science programs. That's a 40% increase from 5 years earlier. I probably don't need to tell any of you this who are joining from the higher education world, as you've seen these programs balloon in size. And it's really a challenge. How do we make sure that we find roles for all these students? Again, much of this is probably not new to you, and I bet it's because your students are noticing and they're telling you. Survey data shows that computer science students continue to be concerned about the state of the post-COVID job market. And at CodePath, we hear about this all the time. This is just a sampling of the stories that we get from CS students who are finding it unexpectedly challenging to start their careers in tech. So in the face of these challenges, this is the conclusion we've reached at CodePath. This is our reason for being. We think that we all together need to rethink how we approach the skills and training we're equipping our CS and IS students with to help them start their careers. The preamble here might have seemed doom and gloom up to this point, and I apologize for that. But I want to hammer home that we really believe that there are very achievable and scalable solutions to address the challenges we've discussed. This is a gap in the tech training and tech talent hiring pipeline, and it's a problem that we believe we can address. Some of the challenges that make up the technical readiness gap are easier than others to solve. I'll be the first to admit that. So all of you know, helping students develop professional networks is challenging. The practice of some old school recruiters still picking their top 5 like target schools for interns is a tough routine for many to break. Similarly, CS curriculum is not going to change overnight, but we can focus on finding or creating programs that address a concrete set of skills that will really move the needle. So when we think about what we can do, we think about how can we create academic programs that teach technical interview training? How can we push students to learn the whiteboarding skills they need and ensure they are familiar with platforms like HackerRank, LeetCode, and the AI coding assistants they're going to need to master to break into the industry? If we can't create these programs on campus, frankly, let's go find resources and programs off campus that can fill the gap. In the advising space, we can ensure students understand the importance of a varied tech resume that includes projects, micro-credentials that can augment their CS degree. I'm really excited to talk to Christy about this because she has a really interesting, unique role bridging career and academic advising. So I think she has a lot to tell us there. I'll also say that when we think about these types of interventions, I think a silver lining here is that this type of skill building, if it can be done in curriculum or with programs from outside, then it's really a way to meld hard CS skills and soft skills together, and it can address multiple challenges at once to prepare students. And this isn't a sales pitch for CodePath. I will mention we're trying to build this solution. Our approach is to try and help in the higher education space by creating courses and programs that specifically address these challenges. We're focused on offering remote synchronous courses that are built with leading tech companies so that we can ensure the content that we're offering is hyper applicable to what we know students are going to need to get into an early talent role. And what we've seen is with a very limited amount of intervention, we can really move the needle, doubling the rate at which students get that first crucial technical internship. So I wanted to share all of that just to give a little bit of preamble as to the challenge we're facing and maybe some of the solutions that I personally believe exist. And I want to transition to the conversation with Christy and Darius, who have much more experience and insight than I will ever have. And as we do that, I'll just like throw a couple questions up that hopefully can create more thought for folks who are joining us and listening today. I hope these are helpful to reflect on as we prioritize where might we focus our efforts in the future. So thank you for listening to that kind of framing. And now with that, I'm going to transition over to some conversation with Darius and Christy. And I'll probably stop sharing my screen just so we don't need to just see slides and we can see our faces a little bit. So Darius, I'm going to start with you. As a recruiting leader at a Mang company, which you might want to define for some folks. I don't know, everyone probably knows that already, but who knows? What does early career tech recruiting look like for you and your team in 2025? What can you tell me about the number of applications, what you're seeing in hiring volume? Like, well, paint a picture for us of the trends.
Yeah, so for those that don't know, Mang stands for Meta, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google. So it's basically the largest tech companies where most engineers or computer science students desire to start their employment. In terms of the number of applicants, we've definitely, and I have friends at all the companies, like we have tens of thousands of candidates who are applying for these roles. What we've noticed, and I'll kind of maybe go through the steps, right? The first step is the internship. What we've noticed from the internship perspective is that candidates a lot of time are not familiar with the recruiting cycle. So if you maybe go to a smaller school, maybe even a community college, you might not be aware that the time to apply for a summer internship is actually in August and September. For those who do apply on time, you know, we have a large pool of candidates who are applying for these roles. And to your point, Michael, we continue to see the number of candidates who are offered the opportunity to take that skill assessment, but there's a major drop off at that point. And so that's the first time I started to think about a program like Cold Path, where if students had more access, especially candidates from underrepresented communities, to a program like this, they would be prepared when they have an opportunity to interview or complete the screen. We also face the candidates who graduating in the next 30 days, right? They're looking for that first full-time offer. And there's an even larger gap here because now once candidates graduate college, there's this, I don't know, limbo zone. I don't know who built it, but it sucks because I actually lived in that place too. Graduating from college, can't find a job, no internships, and it makes it very difficult. Uh, but there are different programs that exist, but it does make it more difficult. So, just overall in general, we are seeing a large number of applicants. We are still seeing a large number of candidates who are not making it through the interview process, either through the assessment or through the final round of interviews because they don't have the proper coaching or training. And so having different programs and like career services or cold paths or whatever student clubs makes it important to help them be more successful.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm gonna come back and hammer you more on like the specifics of the those parts of the interview process. But I want to ask a similar question to Christy and bring you into the conversation and just kind of get your thoughts on like lay of the land for you. What major shifts have you seen maybe in technical student employment for CUNY graduates, and how have you adjusted in the last few years?
It appears to me that employers are expecting more from students. That they have to have top-notch skills for technical interview prep. They have to have projects. They can't be from the classroom. They have to have professional competencies. And for a student, they're lost in a little bit of a way because where do they develop these? The classroom is mostly theory. They have a project, but it's not what employers really want to see in their resume. They want to see something outside from the classroom. They don't know when to do technical interview at all. They should be starting it probably the moment they step on campus if they're a CS major, to be quite honest, and then just gradually learning it every semester. The curriculum needs to change a little bit to help understand what employers are looking for as well, which is something that we're fortunate at CSI that we're working on. And it's just very challenging for students to keep up with the changes, career services to keep up for the changes. I work as an academic advisor and a career counselor. So, what I told a student 2 semesters ago is not the same, right? For somebody coming in. So I'm constantly have to being updated. And if you can imagine the stress and the pressure that a student puts on themselves, to finish classes, to graduate, to take general electives, to do technical interview prep projects, hackathons, codathons, cybersecurity events. They need help, they need support, and they need guidance. And that's where Code Path, Career Services, the academic departments could all work together and truly help students be able to get these positions.
Yeah, I just to double down on what you said there around like how fast the content is changing and how fast the tech landscape is changing. I mean, even for us as a nonprofit that's able to maybe iterate a little bit faster than the average CS department, and changing curriculum is like moving a very large ship. It turns slowly. We have to iterate every year and change our curriculum constantly with feedback, and that's just because we didn't have to think about AI tutoring or AI coding coaches 12 months ago, and now we have to make sure that's part of the education for every student, or else we're way behind the curve. Couldn't agree more. There's maybe on that same track of what are the skills you need to develop. I'd love to know for you, like, what are you seeing as like the skills that CS students have to succeed as candidates that maybe they didn't need? I'd be honest with everybody, I have written down 5 years ago, but that seems silly. I'm just going to change it to 2 years ago. What are the new skills that you need to see from candidates?
Well, I mean, to like Christy's point, I think you mentioned it as well. It's like it starts with the curriculum, and students at these smaller institutions, institutions have actually started to offer computer sciences. This is a more commonplace major, which I don't have a lot of data on it, but there are a lot more schools offering this as a major. And the curriculum is not aligned with what is expected to be, what will help you be successful in a main interview process. And so I think it first starts with, um, as with this emergence of more schools offering this as a major, schools having more opportunities for programs that help students understand what are the requirements if they desire to work at a large tech company. And I think we haven't talked about this much yet, but maybe the reality is your first stop isn't necessarily a main company. Maybe you should start with a smaller company like a Coca-Cola or I'm not sure where people live, but companies that don't have as high of a technical bar to be successful in attaining an internship. And as you start to matriculate through, your years in school, then looking into, maybe migrating to a larger a company. So does that answer your question? I'm not sure I'm answering your question.
I'm gonna like press on one piece you said, and don't worry about whether you answer or not, because I really like what you said there about like maybe you shouldn't necessarily look to start your career if you like you have to start your career at like a top tech company, because so much of the trend we see today, for example, is from students graduating are looking for a reliable paycheck and for stability as much as they're looking for the flashy thing. So we're seeing trends that more and more students are interested in working for government. I think that's a really good point that we can have students working across all industries. We're also seeing more and more industries become tech industries. Everyone is hiring for some sort of tech role. So I think it's a really good point that we can help students understand it's okay if your first job is not at Meta.
And I mean, to a part of that point, like I've worked with over 1,000 engineering candidates who were desirous of coming to work at a main company, and about 70% of them they don't make it through the prep process. It is a long and arduous process that is not for everyone, but for those who have the bandwidth and can push through, it's possible. So I just like for folks to also think that there's also another path forward on the journey.
Yeah. And Chrissy, you want to jump in there?
If I could just say, sometimes students don't realize that there's other companies, and I had a student come in to see me for advisement, and he was very upset. He said, I'm getting ready to graduate. I'm going to be a junior rather. Where am I going to go? I don't know where to work. I don't know what I like. And every appointment that he came in, he had a Mickey shirt on or Star Wars. And I'm like, do you like Disney? And he's like, yeah. I said, then why don't you want to apply to go work at Disney? So he is at Disney now. And, sometimes students just have to understand that they don't have to go to the top companies. They could go to any company and they have to figure out who they are and what they like. So he was so passionate about Disney, he could tell you anything how to get into the park, anything about a ride, and what a perfect fit. So he was a quality tech student, went to a company that he liked. He did take code path classes, iOS app development, Android app development. And what is he working on but apps for Disney? So it was a great way for students to understand that tech is everywhere and they have to figure out where they want to work also. And CodePath just totally got this student here. His name is Nicholas Palermo, and he's very happy at Disney right now.
Thanks for the shout out. That's great. That's awesome. And I think I'm just going to pause really quickly. There's a couple of questions in the chat, so I encourage folks to throw more of those in. Christy, Darius, if you've seen any of these that you're really interested in answering, we can dig into these as well. Stephanie, I just wanted to really quickly shout out your questions. I think it's a great one. Any books or podcast recommendations on this subject? I'm actually going to answer you with a little bit of a slide answer here and say, I think one of the best ways that we can all keep a finger on the pulse of what students are dealing with and like what they're recommending to each other is to get on social media and go on TikTok and start to like look for the influencers from CS curriculum and from CS programs who are talking about these things. We're constantly talking to students who are like tech fellows with CodePath who are posting all the time on LinkedIn and on TikTok and everywhere. And they're really helping us like hear the voice of students and hear what's working. And there's a variety of recruiters, like Day One Darius is one that I can think of just off the top of my head here, who are also posting on this stuff. So as much as I think podcasts and books try to keep up, this is a really fast moving and fast changing landscape. And I think that like social media might even be a better place to keep a finger on the pulse of kind of what's really happening on the ground.
So I do see a question here from iPhone about given someone graduate summer 2024, they have experience, but they've been networking and basically they can't find a job. My advice is to get active on LinkedIn. I am a recruiter. I love being a recruiter, but I'll be very honest with you. I tell everyone the same thing. Do not reach out to recruiters. And I'll tell you why. Because most of the time, unless they mention it on their LinkedIn that they are a recruiter, that they recruit for entry level talent, you won't know what they're actually recruiting for. So a shameless plug to not reach out to avoid reaching out to recruiters. I suggest identifying folks that you maybe identify with, maybe someone from the company who attended the same school, or maybe they like the same sports, or maybe you're from the same country, or maybe you like to play the same sport. All types of things that you can find on LinkedIn. And reaching out directly to engineers or hiring managers or directors, to think about this even smaller, to reach out to the CEO of a startup. Like you would be surprised. Just as a basic example, I literally reached out to the CEO of a company called Hello Interview, which helps mid to senior level engineers prepare for technical interviews to learn more about what they do. And he literally responded to me in 10 minutes. And I'm not even looking for a job. So I encourage people to, get more active on LinkedIn and reach out directly to engineers and managers to see if they can help move you through. Oh, one last thing, but prepare.
Yes.
Prepare. Make sure this person, I'm not sure who they are, but the last thing you want to do is spend all this time, trying to land an interview and get the interview and fail the assessment because that is very common. So that's my last piece of advice on that.
Also,
Christy,
I just think students they have to, I agree with LinkedIn. The only way I communicate with students on career, anything career, is they have to have a LinkedIn account and they can message me on LinkedIn. And my method behind that was just to have them see what their competition is doing. And companies post constantly on LinkedIn. If you follow me, my post is all opportunities for students. I think hackathons work. I think, game jams, whatever you're interested in, you just have to get out there. You have to network with other students. Major League Hacking is another organization that students can work with. But even though you're applying, networking, as Darius said, LinkedIn is key. And again, learning about the companies that you want to work at. I can't tell a student where to work, even though he had his Disney shirt on every day. We had to have him understand that that was his choice, not me telling him what to do. And I think sometimes in career services, even, me in advisement, we try to set the student up for success too much sometimes. And when you give the student the tools, when they understand what they have to do, they take that career management responsibility on their own. And that will help them as well.
Christy, I'm going to build on what you just said there, because I'd love for you to, I'd love to go back to what I mentioned earlier, which is that you sit in what I think is a really interesting role, embedded into both like career advising and academic advising. I think you're in the sweet spot, getting to do all the fun work. And I'd love for you to, you're working closely with faculty. How has that changed how you approach helping students? Like, how have you been able to do things a little bit differently in that hybrid role? I'd also love to maybe plug for you to talk a little bit about the map that you've built out of like different years and what students can be doing during those years, just to give us a sense of that.
Sure. So I actually, it's the best position I ever had within 30 years in higher ed. And Darius, I as well as I have a higher ed master's, higher ed education master's.
Okay.
What I found out when I worked as an academic advisor, I could only talk about classes. When I worked in the career center, I could only talk about careers. When this position came through CUNY 2X, I was able to talk to students and I was able to look at them in like a 360 view, if that makes sense. I'm looking at classes, I'm telling them what they work in classes, when to start using GitHub, when to start doing technical interview prep. I find out from faculty what they're teaching in the class. and I'm able to help them develop professionally, which activities they can attend. It's opened students' eyes as to what's required when. So when a student sits down with me, I developed something called the Career Infused Degree Map at CSI, where every single semester there's a list of classes on one side, and on the other side are career readiness activities that they should do every single semester. What's funny, Mike, is the first one is create a handshake account as a freshman, a draft resume. All of our students have a resume their first semester coming in, and it could be a blank piece of paper. That's okay because they're going to build it. What it also does is it gives students a handout and a guide of what they have to do again, which is career management. Our faculty are using this map for advisement, which is phenomenal. Faculty are researchers for the most part, and they're able now to understand exactly if they're in intermediate programming, what activities should they be working on? If they're in data structures, when is this? Darius mentioned earlier the internship timeline. Students lose opportunity because they don't realize that it's a year before, in a way, to apply. So the map ensures that everybody's on track, faculty, students, and staff. Career Services uses it, as well as touch points throughout campus. The other thing that's important is I know anybody from Career Services, we all have fabulous workshops, partnerships, but sometimes students just don't listen to us or they don't respond to our email. But when a faculty tells them they have to do something, they listen, and that's okay. I'll take it from the faculty member. So when a faculty member is letting them know that there's a code path class, that there's technical interview, the faculty member tells them you need your resume prepared, you need projects on your resume, and you have to apply in like August, September for the following summer. It's wonderful. And when they partner with the company as well, and they're bringing them into the classroom, that makes it even better. And the map's great. I can share it. I'll get the link and put it in the chat. It's just a fabulous resource for students to have academic and career at the same time.
Awesome. Sometimes I feel, for those of you who are on these webinars, sometimes the greatest thing is when someone has a great resource and throws it in the chat and everyone gets to steal it and learn from it. So I wanted to make sure that we plug that for Christy, because I think it's a great one. Darius, I promised you I was going to come back and I was going to hammer you more on metrics. I'm just curious, we spent a lot of time talking about the technical skills that students need to develop. I think Christy mentioned oftentimes CS curriculum is focused on theory, and then we have practice, and students need to practice the practice. What is the biggest filter, the biggest point in your recruiting funnel where you're seeing students exit? Like where do students need to do more today to get a job at one of those MANG companies?
Honestly, I just think it's understood. First is the decision. Like, would you like to work for a main company? Because we all have a similar interview process, and we all require candidates basically to get very active on Lead Code or HackerRank to prepare for the interviews. That is a policy. That is a standard. Not changing anytime soon. Sorry, but it just is what it is. Now, some institutions have a curriculum, and some schools, I think, some Ivy League school actually has a class that literally they prepare you for technical interviews. So outside of that, just the next step is it's basically understanding your data structures and algorithms. There's like a list of 40 or 50. I have to go back and look at it again that you really have to understand. And you have to get your coding speed down, right? So it's not just understanding link trees, arrays, BFS, DFS. It's really being able to know all these different things in your mind and bang it out on the keyboard in a very short time frame, because that's what the technical interview is going to look for. Now, I will also tell you this, which is something different, that some candidates spend too much time preparing for the technical portion and they don't have the social piece, right? They don't exude, or they don't prepare for the leadership, the STAR interview. And that's just as difficult, where maybe you're very good at, solving, coding problems, but you don't know how to work well with others, or maybe you don't like working with other people. And those are factors, or those are behaviors that companies are looking for in the interview process. Not only can you code, but can you work well with other people? And so that being involved on campus, and I'm sure Christy has that on her work map, where you're not just studying, but you're also working with others and building those social skills that are required to be successful.
Yeah, yeah, couldn't agree more. I think one of the key metrics that we track at CodePath for our courses is, did you make a friend? And part of that is because students, in order to participate, the remote courses, but you have to have your camera on, you have to have your microphone on. We need you interacting, and we have to push you to be like working in small groups and collaborating. And if you're not able to make those relationships and able to push yourself in many cases outside your comfort zone, especially a comfort zone that has narrowed for many students who started a lot of their higher education in COVID, they're still developing a lot of those skills. So we have to hammer away at both those specific technical skills, but also the soft skills as well. Couldn't agree more.
Mike, they develop the NACE competencies through your programming, through technical interview prep. So they're working on a team. They're communicating, they're thinking critically. Those are all things that they could get through the technical interview prep course. When they do those on their own, they're doing it by themselves. So to Darius's point, there's no feedback. They're not taking criticism, constructive criticism. They're not working with anybody. So it's so, so important to develop the NACE competencies and the soft skill development through programming and different courses that you take. And CodePath, without a doubt, covers all of those competencies.
Well, thank you for saying that. And I'll tell everyone here, like, as much as I would love to chat with different folks about CodePath, I also understand like there's a variety of different ways that I'm sure we can find resources to help students. But I think the key takeaway for me is always like, we need to find the resources and programs. Hopefully we can build those into curriculum, and sometimes that's by CodePath coming in and having curriculum. Sometimes it's with the CS departments building curriculum, but I think we should focus on these things, and then we can build the right programs to develop those soft skills. Obviously I'm biased. I think CodePath does a great job of that, but we also want to help everybody like figure out what are the structures to do that. As long as we know what to focus on and we know those specific activities that take place in the technical interview process where we can help students focused. But thank you for saying that, Christy. I think one thing that I want to ask for both of you is just, sometimes it feels like this process or this conversation is maybe disjointed between what universities are able to equip students with in the limited time they have and what companies are looking for. And so maybe I ask you both, like, and whoever feels the passion to answer first, go ahead. What can companies and universities do to work together to ensure students develop this technical expertise and those soft skills? Like, what do you think is something that we're not doing today that we should be? Is it communicating more effectively about the clear expectations? Is it just changing curriculum to focus more on these skills that companies are looking for? I'd love to know kind of what you would both, if you could wave your magic wand and create a better relationship and a better pipeline there, what would you do?
It's a good question. My magic wand would be that a company could sponsor my program. So my students have a direct pipeline, right? So, the hardest part is networking. But I think what companies could do is provide activities that will enable the students to develop the technical and the soft skill NACE competency development at the same time. Whether they sponsor hackathon, jam events, project events, something of that sort. Or if a company could come in and teach a class, that would be wonderful. Or the company could come in and do technical interview prep for students in the classroom at different varied levels throughout their years, so they're not so afraid of it. And they drop out before they get to that interview. I've had students afraid to go. One had a Google interview and they were like, "Oh, I'm not ready." And we were like, "You're ready. You got asked for it. Just go." So it's the confidence that they need would help, I think. I think if that answered it. I don't know if Darius, if you could
Yeah,
add.
I think what schools can do better is create opportunities for access. You think about, and I talked about this earlier, right? Like, you think about the alumni from these institutions that do work at these companies. And I think institutions can do better to work with their alumni on a very base level to just interact with the students. Because when someone sees, maybe you went to a small community college, or maybe you went to I went to a school, Kennesaw State, right outside of Atlanta. We never saw a main company come to our career fairs ever, not even to this day, to my knowledge. So it's provided, but there are plenty of individuals who graduated from the institution that work at these companies. And so I think it's an opportunity for these alumni groups to really start to bring those individuals back in to help drive this interaction. I also think about companies like or nonprofits like CodePath that they have the access to these companies and they can help, filter and identify the talent that really needs to or meets a certain level of expertise that should get the interview, right? Because a lot of times, if you get the opportunity, you're not ready for it, it just starts you back over. So I like companies like CodePath and Color Stack and Brilliant Black Minds with Carrot that really hone in and give candidates the skills that they need and then bring them to the next step. So those are my two lanes.
I'll just tell you all who are listening. I'm hearing Darius say these names like Color Stack and other institutions, and so much of the gap in making these programs happen on your campus is often just a knowledge of what programs are already out there. So one thing I am going to ask both Christy and Darius to do after this is send me a quick email with like the top level programs and things you can think of, and we'll make sure to send that out to folks who are who are attending today. Because again, it's just overcoming the hurdle of knowing what's out there is often like the first step to getting these programs built out. So don't worry, I will plumb their knowledge and their expertise and give it to you. I have a couple more questions that I can ask, but I want to make room for questions that are in the chat. And there's one that was posted a while ago that I want to come back to, which is maybe a tough one, which is any recommendations for international students who need sponsorship for internships, full-time work? This is coming from Jay Benedict. I'll give this to either of you. I know that the landscape of international student sponsorship is a tough one these days, but would love any of your thoughts, either of you.
That is a very challenging one for international students. We at CSI, what we work closely with is trying to identify the companies that will sponsor them initially. And once we create that relationship, our career services on campus is really fabulous with that as well. They have a whole protocol. So we try to have a workshop where those companies are invited. It's virtual, and then the international students can attend that as well. But it is very challenging, and it is much harder than it was in 2020 and 2021. I don't know, Darius, if you could expand on that.
The only thing I can think of, and I agree 100%, is I'm sure that there are nonprofits that exist to help international students land internships. So I would just do a quick Google search to see what organizations exist to help with this. And I'm sure there's information on Reddit or maybe even ChatGPT where there's like a list of companies who normally sponsor international students. Or even in the student organizations, like, they they would have an idea of like what companies normally hire for internships for international students as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I think just to lay the honest truth out there, this is a really challenging like time, I think, in American policy when it comes to how many H-1B visas are available and like what might be the future direction that we go in the short term. So I think we all have to like recognize that, and it's like probably more important than ever for international students to be thinking about career and job connections freshman year. I know that I have a student that I've been kind of mentoring and working with just in my spare time at CodePath, who is an international student who's trying to make his way in America, and he's out there hustling every day on LinkedIn and trying to make connections. And I'm doing the best I can to help him, but it's a challenging time. Just
Yeah. Just as an interesting story, and this happened to me twice. I've had like two times, two candidates. The first one happened when I first started at Amazon, but I get a lot of LinkedIn messages, like a lot. And luckily, she just randomly messaged me one day. She said she had like 3 weeks to find a job, or she would be sent back home. And luckily, we are able to have her interview very quickly. And this same individual is still working at Amazon to this day. During COVID, well, actually, right before the hiring freeze, I think it was. I had another young lady. She had just graduated from college. She actually had an offer from another company, but they canceled her offer, and so she had like something like 2 weeks. But she had already completed the Amazon assessment, and so luckily I was able to help her get an interview, and she got a job, and she's still with the company to this day. So to your point, like that networking and LinkedIn is powerful. And luckily, for once, reaching out to a recruiter actually worked. But it's just something that to continue to force the importance of LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely. Stephanie also asked a great question about how we can support students with disabilities in this process. And this is something near and dear to my heart. Stephanie is someone who leads a lot of the accessibility efforts at CodePath and tries to make sure that our entire LMS is built out to support students. I think it's more important than ever for students from a diverse array of backgrounds who want to get into the CS career to just focus on finding your community, like find your people. And I think there's so many sub communities that exist today for students who want to get into the CS world. I would encourage everyone here who works in an advising or academic role. This is like the biggest learning and the biggest lesson that I've taken away from my time at CodePath so far, is that there are so many motivated students who've started these communities. And a big thing that we try to do is just help students find each other. And I think that's, I don't know every single one of them that exists, but I know that that's kind of the first place that we often start, is telling them like, find your people wherever they are.
And just to add to that, most companies have a section on their websites that talks about um, handling candidates with disabilities or employees with disabilities. So I do encourage to just do some quick research to see what exists on the company websites.
Yeah. Thanks, Darius. And I'm gonna tap you back in here because I've managed to make it 49 minutes without talking about AI on a webinar in late 2024. So I feel like, first of all, I deserve some sort of gold star. But I wanted to ask you, I mean, obviously, I think we're all thinking about AI a lot as it relates to the future of work, as it relates to the future of recruiting. You know, are there going to be jobs for CS students? I think there will be. But I'd love to hear like what your experience has been at a large tech company, and like what is the conversation like around how is AI changing hiring? Is it changing the expectations for what students need to know? Can you share some there?
It's interesting, working in this space, right? When you think about AI, it comes in different shapes and sizes, and I'll kind of, I guess, take you on a journey from like how AI is impacting talent acquisition in the interview process. At the very base level, it's very common. Everyone knows it, that candidates are using AI to help generate a resume, right?
Mhm.
That's common, and I, there's no right or wrong, but it's the human eye can tell whether or not something was written by AI. So it's the continuous education, not to tell students don't use AI, but tell them like, hey, like be mindful of adding that human touch, because people can catch on to those types of things. At the next level, so when you think about getting into the interview process, uh, I've heard stories, and I know of people who purchased AI bots that would literally apply to jobs on their behalf. The bots would literally take the resume, check the job description, edit it, and apply. So it's actually saturating the application market. On the next level, the interview process. So you start to think about these technical interviews and the emergence of individuals using AI during an interview. And so there's a lot of talk about this in the community, where what steps are companies, taking to ensure that candidates aren't using AI to, complete assessments or doing the final rounds of interviews. But I think in general, it's just more technology being built to help monitor the AI. So I encourage people like, hey, don't not use it, but be mindful of how you use it because it can be flagged. And if it's flagged, it makes it, you don't want to be flagged in anyone's database because it basically reduces the chances of you ever having an opportunity to interview at a company.
Yeah. Christy, I obviously have a lot of thoughts coming from CodePath and our use of AI, but I'd love your thoughts on the flip side of this around like how are you trying to prepare your students around like the use of AI while they're learning the crafts of CS, but also when they're thinking about the application process and getting into the tech world.
Yeah, it's challenging. When a student comes to me with a wonderful resume, and then of course I just start to interview them, I realize that they used AI. And it's a conversation, not a scolding, not a you shouldn't. It's what do you think is going to happen if you're in an interview and you can't respond to these questions? It's not a quick fix. I try to encourage them to use it more as a tutor. I have a staff in my office, and whenever they're doing their homework, and they open up, ChatGPT or something, and we were mindful on how they respond to how they're asking it for questions, trying not to get the answer. I know that there's some schools also that are using AI for career advisors on a chatbot on a page. So it's here, but we have to figure out how to use it the right way. I do encourage students to use it to understand it because they don't want to be left behind. But to Darius's point, not to use it for a cover letter or their resume. It's the skill that they have to develop, not to let ChatGPT develop that for them.
Yeah.
I think you make a good point. It's also like I was talking to one of my friends about this yesterday, but like how AI is changing people's ability to respond to questions because we rely on it so much. When someone asks you about, hey, tell me about this thing on your resume, like you really don't know how to speak to it. And I think that's one thing AI can't do. And I think there's an opportunity for more education around that to help people continue to learn how to speak to their experiences because that's where that can easily make or break you when you having that human interaction.
Yeah, I think for us, first of all, just for anyone interested in this topic and interested in how the world of AI is intersecting with how we teach coding, I'll really recommend following just about anything that Maggie Johnson, who's a VP doing university work at Google, thinks about this idea of code sense. At CodePath, we're thinking a lot about how do we help students learn how to use an AI coding assistant, which they're all going to use and which every single engineer in the world is using today. But how do we help them use it in a way that they're still developing a code sense and still developing the deep learning that they need to actually do the job, to understand those 40 to 50 algorithmic kind of like rule and concepts that Darius was talking about earlier. So we have to like teach them to use this tool, but also teach them that it's not God, and teach them that it is actually just a tool. And that means making sure they're using it in every course, but also that they're being forced to explain why and how they're using it. And we actually think that an AI tool itself can be created to scaffold that access. So that's something we're working on, which is, we like to joke that we're annoyingly going to make the AI less useful, but make it a better teacher for students as we go through it. But there's definitely more to come there. But I think my main takeaway when it comes to AI is it's safe to say that the Luddites were still wrong. We're all going to have jobs, but they're just going to change a lot. And it's a new tool that we're all learning how to use. But I will say I didn't use AI once for the creation of questions or content for this webinar. So another star. I know we're coming up on the top of the hour. So I just really want to first of all say thank you to those of you who are listening and have posted in the chat and have joined the conversation. Maybe I'm not requiring any closing thoughts from either Christy or Darius, but is there anything that you want to mention that you haven't been able to articulate thus far?
Prep. I think my main thing is, and I put this in the email, is prep before you rep, which basically means like do your homework, do your research, make sure you're ready for the interview before you go and apply, and just build your network. If you do those two things, you won't have to worry about the AI and all the applicants because someone is going to actually refer you for the position. So that's my 2 cents. And add me on LinkedIn. Here's my LinkedIn.
I'll share. If anyone who's listening does want to talk more about CodePath, what we do, how we're doing it within higher education, my goal is to help as many universities and colleges expand capacity and improve their ability to get students to a tech role as possible. So I'd love to connect with you about how we can make that happen. But also we'll follow up with everybody here with all of the resources and thoughts we had here. Because again, I think so much of what this community needs is just access to the information so we can go find the resources and organizations that are doing the great work. So try to follow up with everybody individually so you hear from us. Christy, any last words from you in New York?
I just wanted to thank everybody for attending. And when you work in higher ed, and I've been here for 30 years, my goal is really just to help students grow, graduate. They're going to graduate. I always say that eventually they do, but it really is to put them in a quality position. And every career services academic advisor, we're all overwhelmed. I have a caseload of over 300. But that's why resources such as CodePath, ColorStack, rewriting the code, Develop for Good, which I didn't get to mention as well, which is a fabulous organization. These resources and these organizations could help us prepare students better, and just to utilize every resource that comes your way, because it really is going to put a student in a phenomenal position for a job. It's still up to the student. We can't do all the work for them, but if they're aware of what they have to do, they'll do it with support and guidance from us.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you, Christy and Darius, so much for your time and for all the work y'all are doing. I appreciate it. Appreciate you taking time to have the conversation. And thanks
Thank
everyone who
you.
listened.
Thank you.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye, y'all.
Darius, I'm going to connect with you on LinkedIn.
Okay, see you soon.
Bye.